We just want to hold on just a couple of seconds to allow people to lollygaggle in. All righty then. All right, let's get this party started. Welcome, Tech Art fans. Welcome to another episode of Tech Art Talk Live. Hi, I'm Chris. I am your local technical artist in location right now, I guess. I guess that's what I can be called. I have to come up with a new moniker for myself. But anyway, welcome to Tech Art Talk Live. And today, what we are going to talk about is a very unhappy topic, one that most people really don't like, but it is very near and dear to my heart. On a side note, what we're going to talk about is math. And we're going to talk about the art necessary, the math necessary to be a tech artist. Now, math is the foundation for all things technical art, and it is the fundamentals of everything. The stronger your math skills, the stronger of tech artist you're going to be. It's just that simple. And it kind of correlates to the old guy. I used to study a martial art back in the day, and the Japanese senseis, these old fellows, used to go on. They call it kihon, kihon, and which is basically translates to basics. And just as the basics like for kendo is like footwork and basic swing, were the foundations for all things kendo related. Math is the foundation for all things tech art related. And honestly, I spent my time getting the snot pounded out of me by these old Japanese senseis who could barely stand, but you put a sword in their hand and they suddenly turn into Yoda, and then they turn you into sashimi in a matter of moments. And needless to say, all they had was Kihon. And so therefore, I am going to do my best to keep enforcing the Kihon for tech art, and that is math here. So let's talk about all the math that you're going to need to be a tech artist. All right. Okay. Now, it's basically a handful of maths, and it's really not that much. Of course, there's algebra that you got to deal with, and good old trigonometry. And you got to do something called linear algebra. Now, linear algebra might sound really terrible, but it's really not so bad. And I promise you that just about everyone has seen all the linear algebra that they're going to need in order to be a tech artist already. You probably saw it in middle school or maybe ninth grade or so forth, where you have to deal with things like with vectors and matrices. I promise you, you've dealt with them already. Okay, you probably haven't dealt with transformations, but we'll get with that in a minute. But because it's really, all linear algebra is about transformations, and all computer graphics is really all about transformations. Now, quaternions, they are a little bit dicey. And you only need to know the very basics about quaternions, and I'd be happy to give a lecture on quaternions for idiots, and because that's kind of how I learned. It took me 20 years to learn quaternions, but when I finally bared down, I realized, okay, that's not too bad. But needless to say, all you need to have is a rudimentary understanding of what quaternions are, and calculus. Okay, I'm going to come right out and say for 99% of all tech art related stuff, you don't need calculus. Now, there is one thing that's going to happen in the future that I have a feeling it's coming down the pipeline. And then that means people are going to have a better understanding of calculus. But you'll just have to stick around until the end of my lecture to actually hear what my soothsaying prediction is going to be. All right. Now, we've gone through this before, but the tech art roles are, either you're going to be a pipeline TA, a rigging TA, or you're going to be dealing with lighting, rendering, look development, typically shader writing or creating lighting rigs or creating rendering pipelines. Or you're going to be doing visual effects. And a lot of you folks are probably saying, okay, well, I'm going to be a visual effects artist and somebody else is going to give me all the buttons and sliders and all I got to do is create art. Yes, I know. Yes, yes, yes. That's how you're going to start. But until you learn the math, that's all you're ever going to do. And you're going to be at the entry-level VFX position forever until you learn the math. Once you learn the math, and your career is going to skyrocket. You're going to smash through that glass ceiling, and you're going to go, "What the hell was I waiting for?" Anyway, there are special cases that I'm also going to consider. Now, there is this beast here called a technical animator. Now, a technical animator, I'm going to call it technical anim. Now, a technical animator it's kind of a hybrid of everything. It's a little bit of pipeline, a little bit of rigging, not so much rendering, but a little bit of VFX. It depends on the context of the company that you're working with because it has to do with motion and special effects associated with motion, and it includes the operation of getting mocap through the pipeline. And so it could be any or all of those features. It totally depends on the context of the company that you're working at, and you never know, but I'm still going to include it along because you're going to see it has a lot of overlap. And the last other thing is the generalist. Okay, generalists, okay, I'm going to come right out and say, if you want to be a generalist, you got to know everything. You got to go and you got to be the person who's actually going to be able to teach the math. You got to know math pretty well as your professors in college because generalists have got to be fast, agile, like panthers on their feet, and things like math have got to be something that they pull out of your back pocket and they just go to town with. All right, so let's talk about just algebra. This is the elementary stuff. Now, don't fret this, folks. You're doing it every single day. Now, everybody, all of the tech artist roles, they need algebra. Everyone's going to need it. But in my humble opinion, this is the tech art definition of algebra. It's the study of mathematical symbols and those rules for the manipulating those math symbols. Okay, you have like X and Y and then Z, sounds familiar, X, Y, and Z, or maybe R, G, and B. Guess what? That's algebra. And so everyone's got to deal with it. And, how do you deal with those? All right. Now, certain algebra topics that you need to be aware of, you don't have to be an ace with algebra. All you really need to be aware of is what a variable is, R, G, B, X, Y, Z, algebraic equations, very simple stuff. It's really, okay, how to create a basic formula, a two-dimensional representation, three-dimensional representation of, X and Y, or X, Y, and Z. If you can put it into a graph, that's basically what all 3D CGI is all about. Just algebra, X, Y, and Z in 3 dimensions. Yes, guess what? That's algebraic equations. That's all you really need to know. Simplifying equations. Okay, sometimes you have to go and reduce equations down a little bit. A lot of folks do this kind of like in their head, but you have to learn this skill sometime, and you got to do this. And you got to solve some basic algebraic equations, maybe once in a while. And it helps to understand what an equation of a line is, because once you know what an edge is, hint, and edge, you know what the slope of a line is, then that's pretty much all you're going to need to deal with. So really, just knowing what the slope of a line is really all you need. It's really not that bad. Okay, so what about trigonometry? Ooh, trigonometry, that's one step above algebra. Scary. Okay, who needs to know that? Well, riggers. Yep. Riggers need to be trigonometry masters. Yep. Renderers, folks dealing with rendering and lighting. Yeah, they need to deal with trigonometry too, because you're dealing with a lot of angles. And of course, visual effects artists, once again. Visual effects artists, you guys got to know a lot about everything. Of course, your technical animators need to be aware of it too, because they have to deal with, rigs and animation, which is all about rotations around angles and so forth. But the definition of trigonometry, as far as a tech artist is concerned, is the relationship between the side lengths and the angles of triangles. Okay, that's trigonometry. And so what do you need to be aware of? So the topics that you need to be aware of is, what is a triangle? Okay, What is a right triangle? Okay, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm not trying to patronize you. It really is just knowing what a right triangle is. You know what the Pythagorean theorem is. Okay, uh, the length of the length of the hypotenuse equals x squared plus y squared to the square root. Okay, that's the Pythagorean theorem. You got to know that one pretty down good. Well, you got to know what a unit circle is. Now, unit circles, you may have slept or fallen asleep through, maybe pre-calc or the trigonometry section in high school. I understand. And sines, cosines, and tangents. If you want a refresher class in these functions, contact me, send me email, send me feedback. Tell me that you want a class in this, and I will give a class in this. This is really basic, easy stuff. It's a lot easier than it sounds. Okay, the linear algebra. You're gonna be like, oh God, now he's really throwing the thick stuff at us. Linear algebra. For most tech artists, this is really as hard as it gets. I swear to God. And you've already done it. This is like basic middle school mathematics. I swear. You're gonna see why in a moment here. Okay, riggers, yes. Riggers need to be very good at linear algebra because it's all about these critters called vectors. And guess what a joint is? A joint is nothing but a position in space, x, y, and z, and a direction, which is a vector, hence linear algebra. Okay, technical animators, yes, yes, yes. Anything that a rigger does, a technical animator has to be aware of. And of course, VFX artists, they need to be aware because you're moving particles around. When a particle moves around, what is it? It's got a particle is nothing but a point in space moving in a specific direction. Okay, a point in space, that's x, y, and z, that's algebra. And the direction that it's moving, that's linear algebra. That's a vector. Okay, not that hard. All right, lighting and rendering, yeah, you got to know what that stuff is too. So everyone's got to be pretty familiar with all of these things. What are the topic areas in linear algebra you got to be aware of? Oh, we've mentioned this before, vectors, yes. X, Y, and Z, R, G, and B, A, B, and C, yes. Matrices. Now, matrices are a little bit tricky, but really what they are is multi-dimensional vectors. And I know you all have seen this in high school mathematics, but you may have slept through it all. But this stuff is really good, and believe it or not, when it all comes down to it, all CGI is the dealing with matrices. And hang in there a little bit, and I'll show you why. Because of these guys. Transformations. Everything about CGI is ultimately a transformation. And you're probably going, oh, vector topics. Okay, representation. You got to know, all right, everything is a vector. Red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. You've heard it all before. UV, yeah, guess what? UV, they get the UV, the texture coordinates. Yeah, those are vectors too. The operations, how to do some basic stuff like addition, subtraction, and these things like a cross product and a dot product. You got to kind of know about these, and actually the dot product's really more of a property of the vector, but you got to kind of be familiar with what all that stuff is. So you got your scalar product and your dot product. You got to know what a length is. Guess what? The length is nothing but the Pythagorean theorem again. Okay, this stuff is, you see how it's all building on each other? It's really not that. The matrices, once again, multi-dimensional vectors in n dimensions. Yeah, there he goes. Okay, really, there's just a couple of rules of operation to know and be familiar with matrices before you start doing transformations. But it's really, but matrices is getting your vectors all prepped up, ready to start transforming. And you need to know the basics like addition, subtraction. Multiplication of matrices is a little bit dicey, I have to admit, but that's why we have computers doing them. Computers are really stinking good at multiplying matrices. They're really good at it, and that's why we let the computers do it, because humans not so good, but computers are super awesome at multiplying matrices. Okay, yeah, you kind of had to know what an inversion is, and that's kind of like an upside down matrix just to do the opposite. And, basic properties, what the identity matrix is, what the zero matrix is. All right, transformations. This is really the guts of what all CGI is. If you know what transformations are, you know what, you're going to be the greatest tech artist in the world. But the oversimplification is that you had no idea that all this was going on. Transformations is really the whole red pill, blue pill moment, like in the Matrix, when you realize, oh, holy moly, you mean this was going on all the time and I didn't know? Like, oh, this is like brain warping, because your whole understanding of reality and computer graphics will change once you understand what the transformations are. Everything is a transformations. And so transformations is really all about states and spaces, transforming objects between states, transforming objects between spaces, space 1 to space 2, state 1 to state 2. It's really, that's what it's all about. So a state, you got to deal with scale, translation, and rotation. And then space, you got to deal with these object, local, world, camera, projection, and screen spaces. Believe it or not, you can get by as a tech artist with not knowing anything about transformations. It's embarrassing, but I know many tech artists who have no idea what a transformation is, and they've been doing it, tech art, for a very long time. Now, mind you, they've been in the same place for a long time, but if you want to smash through that glass ceiling, understand what these transformations are, understand what it takes to get an object from object space to local space to world space, all the way to screen space, and then you are on the way to become a bestial tech artist. And it's really not that difficult. You know, if you want a class on that, I'll be happy to give a class on it. I think that would be great. Okay, Quaternions. Yeah, there was an elephant in the room, and yeah, it's Quaternions. And okay, at this moment in time, you don't have to have an understanding of Quaternions in order to succeed as a tech artist. But let's face it, if you're going to be a rigger, you know, you can try to escape the whole thing about rotations until your rigs start to gimbal lock. And if you're not a rigger, you're probably going, gimbal lock? What in Gunny Google is gimbal lock? Okay, yeah, that's when one of your axes freeze because one of the other axes is at 90 degrees. Okay, it happens, and we can go into that a whole lot later. And if you're a technical animator, you might be able to escape without knowing to what a quaternion is. It's all very possible. And likewise, if you're a VFX artist, yeah, you could probably get by with it. But the thing is, the quaternions are all around you. Folks, I mean, like Houdini, and especially UE4, and probably in Unity too. I haven't really explored this, but the quaternions, they're hitting you right over the head with that. And a quaternion, in my humble opinion, as far as tech artists are concerned, are logical rotations without the gimbal lock. Okay, gimbal lock is something that is endemic to Euler rotations, is what you're like rotating around the x-axis, rotating around the y, rotating around the z-axis. Okay, that's all called Euler rotation. Quaternions is a little bit of a different critter, and great thing about Quaternions is that it doesn't gimbal lock. And so what are the topics that you need to be familiar with? You need to know only the basics, because otherwise, it gets too complicated. Quaternions, I have to admit, mentally, it's a challenging topic, but you just kind of need to know the definition is kind of like, well, you just need to know what the shape of a Corvette looks like. You just need to know what a shape of a Porsche looks like. You don't need to know what's going on underneath the hood in order to appreciate it. And that's what quaternions are. Okay, quaternions are ultimately mutant vectors, and they're like mutant matrices that kind of like went off and they all got mangulated, but they do a good thing. They're like kind of like X-Men or something. They're there help. They're there to help. And what you need to know is how to do like addition, subtraction, multiplication, magnitude, all that kind of basic vector matrix stuffs. But you need to know how to represent a quaternion. And there's two ways of knowing how to represent a quaternion. That's either roll, pitch, or yaw. Does that sound familiar? For those folks who are in UE4, guess what? They don't rotate in X, Y, or Z. They rotate in roll, pitch, and yaw. Yeah, those three things. Guess what? Those are quaternions. And what's the basic stuff? Okay, you have the basic definition and what an angle axis is. If you are interested in understanding what quaternion is, I'll be happy to give a lecture. Contact me, send me some information, say, hey, Chris, I want Tech Art Talk to talk about quaternions. All right, but quaternions is all about slurping, gang. Slurping, this is it. Knowing what a slurp is. This is the whole reason why we have quaternions. slurping is called spherical linear interpolation, and that's going from one angle to another. And Quaternions let you go from this angle to that angle without any kind of gimbal lock, and it's awesome, and it's really amazing. Okay, and this really is the dark side here, calculus. Can you get by without calculus? For 99% of the time, yes. And it's a very awesome skill to have, but it's good for only about 1% of your activities, and you probably get by without the calculus. But who needs calculus? Well, that's probably your lighters and your renderers. And guess what? Yeah, it's those VFX people. Yep, the uber beasts. You know, those guys that have been doing VFX, guys and gals actually, have been doing VFX for the last 20 years. Guess what? They all know calculus. Yep. Technical animators. Well, the reason why you got to understand calculus and technical animation is all because you're familiar with this already, and it kind of makes sense, but it's all about position, and then the first derivative of position is velocity, and then the derivative of that is acceleration, and you're dealing with this every single day as an animator. And so you might as well understand that this has the mathematical equivalent to it, and you know it's calculus, and you're doing the calculus every single day. You've been doing it for the last 5 years, you animators. You just never realized it. All right, calculus is a precise way of working out how something changes when something else does. All right, so what are some of the topics you're going to be dealing with? You got to create some formulas. You know, this is why you like VFX people. And you got to understand mathematically how the factors certain affect other factors and so forth. And as mentioned before, it's a very complex and powerful topic. And regretfully, there's not a whole lot of immediate applications. But, bum, 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 here comes the beast that might end up pulling everyone into the calculus vortex sooner or later. Machine learning and deep learning. Yep. It's all about using calculus to fine-tune how those computers think. Teaching a computer algorithm everything that it needs to know is now I don't know about what's going to happen in the future as far as calculus is concerned and about deep learning and machine learning. I don't know how much calculus you're going to need to know and be able to understand. But I've been cursed and blessed with a little bit of vision towards the future. And here's Chris Roda's vision of the future. And for better or for worse, I'm not saying that this is what I want to happen. I'm just saying that this is what's probably going to happen, whether we like it or not. And as a digital artist, somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to make the transition of being an artist and or a designer who's used to, you know, this is what you regularly do. You pull points, you sculpt surfaces, you animate via puppet-like rigs, and then you create worlds, you know, traditionally and procedurally. You know, it's all very straightforward and very hands-on. Okay, guess what? In 5 to 10 years, you're not doing it anymore. If you're an artist and you're a designer, guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to be teaching computer programs to do it for you, because these computer programs are going to do it faster. And ultimately, this is what the real rub is, and it really stinks, and it's really embarrassing, but this is probably what's going to happen. The computer algorithms actually do it better than we can. This is the hard thing to swallow, and this is why it's really scary, is because people are going to want cheaper, faster results that are ultimately better looking. And as far as I know, in order to fine-tune how to teach the computer programs how to do art better, you're going to need to understand a little bit of calculus. Now, I don't know if the calculus thing is going to be really, I'm just putting it out on your radars ahead of time, saying, warning, warning, Will Robinson, you might need to learn calculus in order to understand machine learning. Now, this is all an evolving field, and we don't know where it's going to go to. Just keep your heads up. All right, that's pretty much wraps up what I wanted to cover today. Thank you very much for joining me. If you like what you see, subscribe to my channel. You know, there's Chris Roda on the YouTube channel. On LinkedIn, check me out on Chris Roda and TechArt EDU. And on Facebook, I can be found on Chris Roda and TechArt Talk Live. And if you want to contact me, send me email. Just send it to chris@techartedu.com. Thank you very much for joining me this week. Thank you for bearing through with my lesson in Quijón. And join me again for Tech Art Talk next week, and we will have another entry into our Procedural Gems series where we will be interviewing Luis Cruel. And if you don't know who Luis is really awesome, and he's one of the major artists who's responsible for Houdini Labs, Side Effects Labs. Yeah, and you know who this is then. So please come and join me next week for Luis. Thank you very much for, again, joining me. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.